Mercedes.
Are we ready to roll?
The bumper came up.
That's a great story.
Don't tell it.
I won't. Not until I get home anyway.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Mark? Good to see you. Good. We're all set? Okay, we're going to call the Town Commission meeting for Friday, April 9th, 2021 to order. Pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rita, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, Commissioner Lyons?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Orthwein?
Here.
Vice Mayor Stanley?
Here.
And let the record show that Mayor Morgan is absent with notice. Also present are Town Manager Dunham, Assistant Town Attorney Nazaro, Police Chief Allen, and myself.
The minutes from the last regular meeting of March 12th, 2021, and also we had the local planning agency meeting and those minutes. Motion to approve. Are there any changes?
I have one question. Trey, it was reference to the first meeting for myself, recusing myself, but then in subsequent motions to approve, it said all commissioners approved. Is that okay?
We
Do
can,
we need to call me out in each one of those?
I think it's sufficient that all
Okay, good.
voted.
Thank you.
Not include you as a refusal.
No change.
Okay, motion to approve with no change, please.
I make a motion to approve the minutes with no changes.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Lyons?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Commissioner Orthwein? Vice Mayor Stanley?
Yes. Rita, do we have any additions, withdrawals, referrals on the agenda, changes? No.
We're all right.
No changes, the agenda will stand as it's presented. Announcements, you'll see the regular meetings for the next month and public hearings. Public comment, anybody from the public wish to speak? Mr. Hackett?
Morning, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, everybody else. It's so nice to be in Chambers again. I just wanted to give a shout out. Sometimes you only hear the bad things about that happen. And I just wanted to tell you, I've had the pleasure for the last 2 weeks of working with your Assistant Town Attorney, Trey, and he's fantastic. You guys really have a good gem there. He's articulate, he's on top of things, he's proactive, and above all, he's passionate. So you're very lucky.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Public hearings. Anybody have any ex parte communication in regard to this application? No? I walk by the house twice a day, but other than that, no ex parte communication. Who's going to speak on behalf of the applicant? Mark?
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Good morning, Mark Marsh, Curtis Marsh Architects. Here representing, let me try this correctly, Mr. and Mrs. Christopher Ruth. I was trying to say Lisa and Chris Ruth, and I got too many first names. Yeah, this is on Gulfstream Road, 3012 Gulfstream Road. It's an old house. It was built in 1951. It's, I call it country cottage. The characteristics as such, it's primarily a frame structure. It has a very low roof pitch. Fortunately, the roofs have decided, like most other people who would have torn it down and put up a new structure, they've decided to do some expansion and some renovation to the house and preserve it pretty well in the character that exists today. The reason we're here is because we're asking for a special exception to create or extend a non-conformity in terms of setbacks. And, I can find this pointer. Basically, the house is sitting on Gulfstream, which is on the low portion of the exhibit there. We're going to change a driveway, that's a circular driveway, and I'll put a single entry. That's the main site modification. But the areas that are under request for the special exception are, currently the house it had a carport and a one-car garage here, and small kind of caretaker's bedroom here. The intention is now to expand into that area and remodel that area, as well as adding a new two-car garage, which will be side entry, not facing a street, and then enclosing an open area here and adding a new bedroom on the west side. By doing these additions, we are asking for relief because of the non-conforming setbacks here. We want to extend them to incorporate those additions I just mentioned. One of the curious things, and you can see here, is that obviously when this was built, property lines weren't very important because of the skew. I think this is one of the first houses, if not the first in town, that I've run across that actually doesn't align with a parallel setback. So it has a fairly unique condition. The other additions are a small master bedroom extension here. So this is a plan. Unfortunately, the screen doesn't show the whole, but this was the carport. This was the garage. This was a smaller bedroom. Because the house is very formal in nature, they have a wonderful living room, very classic, and they've owned it for about 4 years. They've upgraded the kitchen and tried to create a dining room slash lounge, and it just hasn't functioned because they have 2 younger kids. So the idea was to create a family room, create a proper laundry room, which doesn't exist now, and create a little office den area along with a new bedroom suite on the west side. The extension of the master is, again, to just make it more livable. It's really quite confined. And then part of the proposal, which ARPB has approved, is to do a covered loggia on the western end of the south wing. Here we go. This is the roof plan. Again, based on the style, this is a very low pitch. It's a 3 and 12, which is almost illegal for a hip roof. But with that said, we are going to continue the slope of the hip to marry and match and blend into the existing. And the whole thing will then obviously become more unified. So this is the existing and proposed elevation here, this being the main house that exists to about here. The existing garage was very subordinate. It was actually lower than the main house. You can see the center of the house is a classic entry where the living room and primary rooms were, and then the 2 flanking wings were bedroom wings. So this is going to be elevated to match and blend into the existing roof so that it's more seamless. This is the garage with 2 very simple windows. They are going to actually do some corbelling or rafter elements under the eaves just to kind of give the roof a little bit more presence, because you can see how low the pitch is here. This is the proposed north wing with a new garage. That's a golf cart door, and then the new wing here of the master or the guest suite. The north side or the west side that you see on the lower elevation, again, is replicating the fenestration and all the design elements that currently exist. This is that covered loggia, which will have a fireplace, winter porch effect. And then the new garage will be a side entry, as I mentioned, and what's becoming very common in town, which is a louvered panel with an upper glazed unit on the top. We are adding a couple of bay windows, which are cantilevered. They're not coming off the floor. Again, just to give a little bit more character to the house. In terms of landscaping, there's very little modification. There are two Neronia trees, which are very established and very much present on that road, on Gulfstream Road. The new entry will come between them, and then you'll have a monocourt T-shape going into the garage and some guest parking on the south side. The planting is very simple. They're going to be bougainvillea, green island ficus, and then the back they're going to supplement with some Japanese blueberries, some more palms, but mainly foundation planting. The property is well established with landscaping. This is kind of a visual image with two Neronia trees. So instead of having two driveways off Gulfstream, you'll just have a single driveway. The driveway will be gravel, and then a brick and gravel with grass crisscrossing and bordered by a brick, which currently exists there. So this is kind of a snapshot view of, this is the existing entry here, and that's the new garage. And it's complies with the garage, meets the front yard setback. So the only request today is for the special exception of continuing a non-conforming setback.
On the north side.
The north side. So I'll answer any questions the commission may have.
It looks good.
I think it's excellent.
Thank you.
I think, make two comments. One, shifting the garage so it's facing, I guess, drive the car into the north is obviously preferred. And preserving the house rather than tearing it down and building another house, I think is really good for the town.
I totally agree.
And I think you did a great job on it, which is normal.
Yeah, it looks really good. I think we've always wanted to promote a one-story home and sort of an adaptive reuse of a structure that's pretty functional. But now I was kind of looking at this floor plan, Mark, and it looks a lot like the kind of the newer one-story homes that are going in on spec, for lack of a better phrase. So it looks really, really functional.
Can you retract that word, please? I understand.
Yeah.
This is more character.
Yeah.
But I mean, it has all the elements. So you got, 4 or 5 bedrooms, an office, a family room, living room, dining.
The program is
there. Yeah. The loggia. That's what I meant. Now it's got a little more. It's unique.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad that they've chosen to keep the same home, and the elements have brought it up to date, but yet retained a lot of charm.
Right.
Yeah, well said.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right. Go to the motions.
I move to approve a special exception to permit addition to a single-family dwelling with existing non-conforming setback.
Second?
Read a call roll, please.
Commissioner Lyons?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Commissioner Orthwein?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stanley?
Yes.
I'll move to approve a level 3 architectural site plan review for the permit the addition of a 2-car garage, a guest suite, and a minor addition to the west side of the master bedroom based on a finding that the construction of a 2-car garage, guest suite, and minor addition to the west side of the master bedroom meets the minimum intent of the design manual and applicable review standards.
Second?
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Lyons?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Commissioner Orthwine?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stanley?
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor,
Yeah.
before he leaves, I would like to, on behalf of the town of Gulfstream, wish Mr. Marsh a happy birthday.
Birthday.
Happy
Thank you.
Happy
I'm
birthday.
trying to catch up to her.
Oh, you got a long way to go.
49 again.
Thanks, see you, Mark.
All right, reports, town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Of course, always first on our list here is the utility undergrounding update. And, so I'm happy to say that, AT&T, well, let me take a step backwards. One of the last things that the utilities do, that would be FP&L, AT&T, or Comcast, in this undergrounding process is wrecking. This is a term they use, is wrecking their old services. That simply means going in and taking all their old wires and that sort of thing down. So AT&T has actually finished that. And they have found a couple other places where they were serving an individual house by one pole and one overhead line. So, at their own expense, they're having to go back in and put, there's one over on Banyan Street that they're probably doing today or in the next couple of days. They're gonna have to bore a conduit, but for the most part, they are done. Comcast Cable is, they have switched after March 31st from the old method of providing the service to the fiber. And so they are beginning, actually today, they are beginning their rec out process. Now you won't see a bunch of Xfinity trucks out here taking the service down yet. They first have to make sure they have what they call 3 nodes, that they're all working properly and that no current residents were left out of the switchover. And then they will, then they'll take their services off the poles. I think, to be conservative about it, I asked yesterday, and they felt like that they would definitely be done with all that by the end of April. I think it'll be sooner, but, so as you know, I've been working with FP&L, giving them a heads up and lead time that AT&T and Comcast were going to be finishing up around April. And so, in fact, this week, myself with FP&L, we walked the phase 2 out here on A1A to identify and verify where the new streetlights will be going. So that's really a good first step for FP&L to come in, and obviously they got to put the new streetlights in before they take the old ones down, because the DOT won't allow it to not be lit up. So we did that, and so the information is good. I think we're making progress, and I don't know if I should say that I hope by the end of the summer all these things will be down, but all of the utilities that are involved in this know what their role is right now, and I think we're in a good shape.
So do we have a project manager or somebody that's assigned to this full project for FPL?
Yes.
Yes and no?
Yes, we do. But I work through the person who's a liaison with towns and cities, and he really is kind of the traffic cop directing, the timing of everything. And so, but there is, yes, and I met him on this week when we went out and walked up and down A1A. I met that gentleman that would be in charge of it. Yes.
Has he provided us with any kind of schedule?
No. No, not anything on paper, but, I do believe that, they are scheduling, all this work to be done. They're just waiting for, Comcast and AT&T to be totally out, or they won't start until they've got all their, equipment off the poles.
With AT&T and Comcast, you arrange for representatives from those companies to present in front of the commission. It seemed to help them move along. Do you think FP&L will be willing to do that, really for the purpose of just keeping us informed?
Oh, sure. I mean, I can have, Mr. Weiss, he's been here before, and, I can have him at the next meeting.
Do you think that's constructive? Is that helpful or not really? You don't think so? No?
Actually, I don't. It's,
Okay.
What's more important is my communication, my constant communication with them I mean, he's gonna come in here and tell you the same thing that he tells me, so.
Okay.
So I just relay that.
So I don't think.
But I can have him here if you would like to.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on undergrounding report? We're heading towards conclusion at some point in the future. Building design legislation update, Trey? Oh, yeah.
I see that question.
Oh, okay, question.
Cut the crap. Greg, am I hearing correctly that the poles on Little Club Road will be down, you think, by the end of the summer?
Yes, if I was gonna make a prediction, yes, I think so.
But not before?
Well, it depends on what you define as the summer, so, I mean, but yes.
Say by September. Do you think they'll be down by?
I think so, yes.
That's exciting. Also, may I ask about our street sign for Little Club Road?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of trouble getting anybody to just make one sign, and so we finally have somebody. And so we asked if the Little Club, if we could use their, they've got a sign on there on a pole, if we could put it on that pole. And they said, yeah, I don't think so. So now.
Well, we wanted to have a pole like everybody else.
Well,
has.
the problem with the stop sign where we normally would do it, it's way too far back. So it looks like we're gonna put one on the other side.
Thank you.
So, okay.
Okay, any other comments and questions on undergrounding and the poles coming down?
You promise?
Sometime in 2021.
Good answer.
Hope you're right.
I've done this. I've done this.
No, I feel confident that they'll be down before then.
The town manager says sometime in 2021 with confidence.
Okay.
Yes.
Can we see that email?
I do have to make an observation that Greg and Trey have really been on these three utilities, and you really have moved along the best you can, so we appreciate it.
Well, that's my goal. I think I told the mayor this, that I want them out of here, the AT&T and Comcast out of here by the end of April, so.
It's gonna be a big day.
But I will have to say, it's encouraging that FP&L is, planning for the replacement of the street lights, because that's really the first thing that they will do. And so, that's encouraging. 'Cause I remember they didn't replace those street lights until phase 1 was already completed last time, because I was already here when they put those street lights in. Now they're on the ball now, so.
Yeah, certainly, because we had an unnecessary hurdle that could have grind this thing to a total halt for an indefinite period of time, which you all handled in pretty good order with Ms. O'Connor. Okay, building design legislation update.
Yes, I think I mentioned at the last meeting of legislation that was being introduced up in Tallahassee that would have a very significant impact on Gulfstream in particular because of our strict design guidelines. It was addressing or attempting to strip away the local authority to develop design guidelines that like we have. And so I have to echo the mayor's comments about Trey. I just said, Trey, I'm working on underground utilities. You work on this, and he's done a wonderful job reaching out to other communities, and, the league, and, you know, looking for ways that we can address this. And, so I think we've come up with kind of, as Mr., our attorney, Skip, our former attorney, called ingenious. So I'm gonna let Trey talk about the ingenious way that, if this legislation does go through, how the town might be able to address that.
Right. Thank you, Town Manager. So the legislation discussed last month regarding building design continues to move forward. We did get it to stall out before it passed its last committee in the Senate. So we believe that there's maybe an amendment coming. We just don't know what it is or if it will be beneficial to Gulfstream. A lot of the smaller communities that I've been working with through the Florida League of Cities have indicated that would be something like an exemption for municipalities that have design review boards like our ARPB. So that would be great. That would be a silver bullet. We could just continue to operate as things exist. But the fact that we've had maybe 2 weeks of silence while it's kind of just been sitting indicates that there's no like firm agreement from the other side, essentially. So again, the bill would prohibit us from regulating building design elements, which the bill defines as external building color, the type and style of exterior cladding material, the style or material of roof structures or porches, the exterior non-structural architectural ornamentation, the location or architectural styling of windows or doors, the location or orientation of the garage. So obviously those are things that are all extremely important to our design manual and to our code, and that the ARPB reviews on a monthly basis. So again, in its current form, the bill doesn't have any exemptions like the planning board exemption that would apply to Gulfstream without the town taking some sort of legislative action in advance of its passing to sort of get us out of that. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about what we're proposing to bring before you at the next meeting. Our planner, Marty Miner, believes the first exemption contained in the bill could be used by the town due to the historic nature of our core beachfront and Ocean West district. The bill says that it does not apply to dwellings located in a historic district under the terms of a local preservation ordinance. So hear me out while we talk about this. I'm not trying to create something that's going to stifle or designate individual homes as historic. It's just going to be protecting the architectural style in our communities. So we're currently working on the ordinance language to create these historic districts, and we're presenting them to you for first reading in May. So the town code already has very thorough and thoughtful district descriptions that were created as part of a comprehensive study. So much of the work in the way of research and analysis to create these historic districts has been done. So for example, if the town created a core historic district that would be the core single-family zoning district, then the town would be able to regulate the building design elements on structures and buildings in that district and require new homes and renovations to follow the Gulfstream Design Manual and Town Code. So again, the purpose of the historic district would not be to designate any specific home as historic or to prevent any property owner from tearing down their house, but instead it would require a new home or renovation follow the town's building design elements as they currently exist and as we currently apply them. This process would require an amendment to our comprehensive plan to designate these areas. And at this point, we've been cautioned not to overreach the historic nature of our community. So we're probably not looking at protection for Place South Soleil or the North-South district. We're probably really just looking at the beachfront district as it abuts A1A, and we have a lot of historic properties there and a lot of language in our code relative to that district, obviously the core district as well. With that district language and the historic nature of the architecture and those properties. And then, of course, the Ocean West district, but really just the one that abuts A1A next to the core, but probably not the section south of the golf club. So that's what we're looking at as far as those, and that would, again, essentially save those districts from, from this bill. So we can continue to apply our building design standards in that way. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about that specific action that we're looking at.
Question just on timing. How fast is the bill moving? Do we need to
Sure, so
All
the,
right.
yes, sir, so the effective date would be June first, so we would have first reading next month in May. Then we, if it is a comp plan amendment, we would need to send it to the state. There's a short review period there. And we may need to call a special meeting just for second reading to make sure that that's adopted beforehand, but as far as the timing goes, we're fine with that.
I think that sounds really good. And is there any way you can make it go a little farther south of the, golf club, because it's a historic highway, it's designated?
So for the beachfront, we are
I mean,
looking
just,
at
yeah,
the entire beachfront district, right?
Okay.
Everything that's
Okay.
single family. And of course, it only applies to single family, so, you know, there wouldn't be the need to designate our multifamily. But yes, everything on the beach would be as part of that beachfront district, historic district. What I was really talking about was like the 13 and 1400 blocks of North Ocean.
Right.
I think, again, we'll have to look at that.
right.
But we don't want to overreach. We want to make sure that the areas that we can protect are protected without sort of going a little bit too far afield.
I think it's a brilliant idea.
So,
I mean, I really do.
So we're not gonna have, in the proposed ordinances and the comp plan amendment, we're not gonna have contributing or non-contributing designations. That's really, you know, obviously, we can have our own historic district, which doesn't have to be mirror the Secretary of the Interior or anything like that. So it's gonna be as to the architectural style only.
that's right.
Yeah. So it's actually a lot shorter than a lot shorter than a typical, overlay or historic district, right?
That's right. You know, in talking to, Town Attorney Randolph about this, you know, he said, well, we have obviously historic, properties in Palm Beach. And he said, well, that's way more comprehensive than what you're looking at. You're looking at something that's very simple and straightforward and really just preserves that architectural and requires them to build structures in accordance with that historic, architectural
Yeah,
style.
five architectural styles that we have.
When we speak to architectural, does that include the
It would really just be the
quantitative, like setbacks?
setbacks are not impacted by the bill, so it
Okay.
really just address the building
What about
design
square
element.
footage?
That would not be,
Okay.
well, I'll get to that as another way that we're potentially looking at. But for historic, no, that doesn't. Setbacks, square footage, let's see, the location of the dwelling on the zoning law, none of that is a building design element, so that wouldn't be impacted, we wouldn't need to change anything.
So if we have a bit of a timing issue with regard to what we're doing in regard to the legislation, we still be able to do a zoning in progress if we have something coming down the pike that looks like it would try to take advantage of the new bill before we're ready.
Absolutely, we definitely have that time because it's, like I said, we would be able to do something at the June meeting at the latest if we're having an issue. You know, the idea is to get this in beforehand, but in the event that we can't, yes, we can absolutely.
Tom, you're more comfortable with this arena than I am. Are you comfortable with how all this is going?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is that, you know, these things are rather serious and they always happen in the summer. We're used to that. And the second thing, I mean, this hasn't matured quite yet or ripened yet, but you just have to, I mean, Trey articulated what this doesn't do in comparison to a typical historic district overlay. You know, there's 4 or 5 districts in Delray that have, you know, standards that are much stricter. I think just conveying this to the residents of the town when we're ready, you know, because it has the term, we just created, you know, 5 historic districts, period. I wouldn't say it's negative. You know, I live in one of the oldest houses in Gulfstream, and the town staff is great at helping me restore and rebuild that and adapt it, so I'm probably the exception. But you just have to have the right messaging out there that we're not imposing any additional restrictions that you're not already subject to as a resident or prospective homeowner or builder or what have you in the town of Gulfstream. I mean, Trey articulated it, but the general public, you know, probably doesn't.
They'd be worried we're gonna historic landmarks in their homes.
Right, and I wanted to make it clear that that's not,
Yeah.
we're not looking at any individual property.
Sure.
Can you put a different label on it?
Unfortunately, we're bound by the language and the exception in the
Okay.
legislation, so we would need to be a historic district under a local preservation ordinance. So that's sort of part A, and that would really only apply to, what we're looking at is portions of Ocean West, the core, and the beachfront district. We don't think in the North-South district or the Place Oscar Lake district at this point would be able to fit like a historic district. We'll continue to look at that, but I've been cautioned by Attorney Randolph to not overreach on those districts. So that will help with that sort of piece of it. So then I'm going to transfer to sort of our other thought, which is what Town Manager Dunham mentioned that Mr. Randall thought was ingenious. So we're looking at incentive zoning, which would apply to the entire town as a part of an incentive to construct homes consistent with the building design elements contained in the town code. The town would modify its floor area ratio calculations. That's what you were talking about. Does it impact? So it doesn't, but we're looking at perhaps modifying that calculation to incentivize people to build homes with the building design elements that are currently in the code. Marty Miner agreed that this would work and is a very common practice. So what we would be doing is we would adjust the base floor area ratio calculations to make them a little bit smaller. As an incentive to build a home in accordance with the town code and all of its building design elements for that architectural style, the property owner would be able to build a larger home, but only one that's consistent with the floor area ratio calculations as they currently exist. So this incentive would help maintain the prevalence of, Spanish Mediterranean, Gulf Stream Bermuda homes throughout the entire town. That is not as solid a protection, but in talking to Rita about this, I asked her, I said, how many homes have we seen in the last 5 or 10 years that build less than the maximum floor area ratio? And she said, I don't think there are any. So we're certainly, even if it's 20%, if it's 10%, if it's 30%, whatever the reduction is, it's a good incentive to say, well, I'm going to get an extra 1,000, 2,000 square feet in this house if I build it with these design elements. I don't believe that we're unduly burdening any properties by doing this, because they can always choose to construct a house that will allow them to maximize their floor area ratio. And if we enact it in advance of the legislation, we're technically making the code less restrictive by saying you can actually build whatever you want, you just have to build it a little bit smaller, as opposed to making it a little bit more restrictive. I see.
You've got to have options A, B, and C. So we need to concurrently pursue all of them, which you're doing, which is excellent. But my comment is we are seeing some I wouldn't say the term strange things, but we're just seeing different residents and whatnot, or prospective residents come in with some things that even in the last couple of years that we didn't think people would want to do in a residential neighborhood. Whether it's a double, triple lot thing, which our code does address right now with FAR and whatnot, to vacant lots for parking and different things are kind of changing. So obviously option A, which would be the historic designation, would be the most favorable for the town, but keep it the way it is. So, especially and I'm thinking the other part that I'm thinking in the back of my mind, which I think everybody in the room has seen, is there's what we call the modern or monolithic structures that are going in the town of Delray everywhere. Some on spec and some private homes, which is basically your white box, right, typical thing. Something like that. Obviously it's not something that fits the character of this town. And if you talk to planners and architects and work in Delray, they think that there's like a period of significance with regard to all these structures. In 30 years, you can have what was going on from 2015 to 2021 or 2024 with these houses. So something we're seeking to avoid.
Trey, on that second step, so for example, if a house today you could build 5,000 square feet, are you saying that we're going to amend the code where you don't follow certain architectural standards, you can build a 5, but if you don't, you only can build 4?
That's right.
Okay, we're not adding 1,000 feet to the property.
Correct. There would be no increase in the current maximum flow area ratio.
So if this goes through, there'll be a significant revision of our code?
Not really with respect to, so, I mean, I would say no. So the historic part would just continue to further the existence of our single-family zoning districts. And the second part is just a revision to the sliding scale floor area ratio to make that number a little bit more restrictive. And if you want to build whatever you want, but if you choose to adhere to the building design elements, like for example, if you had, you know, a point lot in Place Au Soleil, very large, overlooking the water, you know, like to take Mr. Lyon's example, are you going to build a 4,000 square foot home on this really pristine, beautiful lot? Are you going to meet the Gulf Stream incentivized zoning to build with this specific architectural style so you can get a 5,000 square foot house? We believe that incentive would be enough to sort of ease them into the direction of agreeing to adhere to the town code with our building design elements. So the only change would just be to those figures. It wouldn't be anything very comprehensive. The code is beautiful and works perfectly the way that it exists. And we don't want to change that. We just want to incentivize them under our zoning power to, to encourage them to adhere to the existing codes, even if they don't have to, if this legislation passes without any protection for us.
Tough job for the ARPB.
So again, we're looking at, reviewing this kind of more in detail at the next commission meeting.
So at the next commission meeting, we would have something that we would be providing to you with both, on both of these. And if we wanted to adjust them, we can certainly do that, at the meeting, or, call a subsequent meeting to move in a certain direction. With the sliding scale floor area ratio, we just don't know what percentage we're looking at. We don't want it to be 50%, because then you're really forcing someone to do it. But we want to make sure that we're hitting the right spot with that incentive.
I think it's great.
Very good. So we've got a couple of options. Thanks for all your hard work on this. A lot of people aren't aware of what's going on, but I have had a couple of calls from residents who are paying attention to it. So it's a little more concern out there.
Yeah, a lot of people have asked. I mean, maybe they haven't called, but they should have asked me when they see me. So I think through the civic association and through other things, people are aware, which is good. Education.
I mean, I think that's part of why it stalled out. I mean, I'm just glad that we got to it before it passed all its committees and got to the floor. So I don't know if maybe there's some pressure. I mean, we have reached out to Senator Caruso, or Representative Caruso, as a representative in our district, to make sure that he's aware of it when it comes up to the floor, whether or not he is going to talk on it, propose amendments. So, we've been in regular contact with the Florida League and our group of like-minded municipalities and that want to make sure that we get some language in there.
I just think getting the word out is the best thing that's happened, and it seems to be effective.
Okay. Reverse osmosis water plant, Gulf Stream Golf Club.
Yes, Mr. Vice Mayor, maybe asking why is this on the agenda under this section of the agenda, and the reason is because we wanted to have a discussion, almost a workshop with the town commission before we hit you with an amendment to our zoning code, which this would require. And I'll let Trey talk about that here in a minute. But back in March, early March, the staff was approached by the golf club. You see Mr. Ryan Swilley up here, who's the golf course, superintendent, and, is there anything else?
Yeah, Mr. Robert Clay is our incoming president.
Yes. Mr. Clay, and Mr. Clay was also present, and the outgoing, president for the club, Mr. Laidlaw, was, in the, meeting. So this was the first time we had heard about this, and, so, of course, we as the staff, it's our responsibility to help guide applicants through the application process, so what we, the staff, did, then said, well, look, can we meet with you guys out at the potential RO plant, where you're gonna, the location that you wanna put it. And so we did that, as a follow-up to the first meeting. Then, our staff, and by the way, I've got some experience with reverse osmosis water plants. When I was in Manalapan, we were required to, our permit for our conventional water plant was coming to a close, and so the South Florida Water Management District said, well, you can't take water from the superficial aquifer anymore. You're going to need to do, take it from the Floridian aquifer, which is like at 1,200 feet versus 300 feet with the superficial aquifer. So we had to, refine our plant to make it a reverse osmosis plant, which meant, drilling a well and then changing the actual process to treat the water. So we asked the golf club if there were other golf courses that had RO plants, and there sure enough are. One being the Everglades Club in Palm Beach. That's located on County Road. Where County Road goes, off of A1A, and so it's right across the street from some very big homes there. Our concern, and the concern that I ran into after we completed the plant in Manalapan, was noise and odor. And so, so Trey and I went and toured the RO plant at the Everglades Club, and we found out that the treatment process is not quite the same. We weren't comparing apples to apples when comparing that to the Manalapan plant that I was, familiar with. So when we went there, obviously you go in the plant, it's very, very loud, but standing outdoors, there was not a lot of noise that you could hear. The advantage to that plant was that it has County Road, which has a lot of traffic on it, and so by the time you cross the street, the noise was not a factor coming out of the Everglades Club. And so then again, as I say, the treatment process is not quite the same as Manalapan, and so we toured the facilities where the effluent goes from the treatment of the water, and they use a lake system to hold that, and we did not smell any odor anywhere adjacent to the water plant. Nor did we smell any odor around the lake where they dumped that effluent into. And the management there said they really, over the years, as long as he's been there, had only a couple of comments. He didn't describe them as complaints, but comments from golfers, but no resident complaints about the odor. So then we went to Manalapan and spoke with the manager there. And then we toured, once again, the RO plant in Manalapan. And again, the treatment process for that is different. They do mix the superficial aquifer water with their RO water. And so they have a process that's not included in the treatment process at Everglades, and that it's a big piece of equipment that scrubs the water in the treatment process with air, and so that air then escapes, through an exhaust, and that's where they typically get the odor. And so when I was in Manalapan, I got frequent complaints from residential areas that were adjacent to the water plant, both for noise and the odor. But when we were out there, we did smell, randomly walking the campus of the plant, we would randomly smell the sulfur odor, but it was not nearly as strong as when I was there before, because they made some upgrades to the treatment process. And there's also a plant up there in North Palm.
Yeah,
Lost Tree. And this is Mr. Swilly, so he's going to show a picture of that plant up at the golf course in Lost Tree, and how it is adjacent to residential homes completely surrounding it. So we have not contacted them to see what kind of complaints, if any, that they may have, but their plant would be similar to Everglades in that they're only treating the water for irrigation purposes. As I did mention, currently our code does not allow this kind of a use in the outdoor recreational districts, and so before we even consider this, the town would need to make an amendment to our code to allow that as a use in the outdoor recreational district. So we, because of the significance of this, with its potential impact on the residents, and the scope of the project, we've been working for a month, basically coming up with a schedule of approval for them, because the club would rather move on this sooner rather than later. And I think originally what they wanted to do was to first build the well, and then perhaps in phase 2, maybe next year, build the plant. I think we're still discussing that. I think there may be more advantages to them to do that, to get the approval simultaneously. So that's why we're doing this today. We wanted to introduce this subject to you. Mr. Swilly's going to explain why they would like to have the RO plant and the location of it, why they want to put it there. But those are the two points that are important to this, this application and the construction of an RO water plant is the noise and the odor. So those are the things that really need to be addressed by the applicants in this process. So, Trey, do you want to talk about the approval process?
Just relative to the change to the code, so it would be a special exception use that we would allow in the outdoor recreational zoning district. There would be specific, special exception criteria that they would need to meet relative to construction of the building, making sure that comparable to when we were in the Everglades Club. I mean, you're inside the plant and it's active, and you practically need earplugs, but you stand directly outside the building, you don't hear anything. So something in the construction of the building needs to make sure that occurs, and I think that they have, they're familiar with that project there, and they can do something similar. We would also have protections relative to any odor complaints or noise complaints that we get in the event there were any odor or noise complaints. In talking with staff and with applicant, we constantly bring up the pickleball example where, well, you don't really know what sort of impact there's going to be until you kind of build it and see what happens. So we shared that, and I think that's why Mr. Swilly has some information about what the impacts are of these plants when they're located directly next to residential areas, which we do see in Palm Beach and other affluent communities where, you know, they are all our golf courses that have irrigation needs. You know, even though this is just on the town manager's report to sort of pull Vice Mayor Stanley's comment from earlier, you know, it's interesting how these things happen during the summer. We wanted to make sure that this got out as much as possible, that it's in the Coastal Star, that everyone knows that this is happening, so there's no, well, we didn't even know this was happening. So we wanted to make sure that because the club approached us kind of late in the season, that we said, well, they want to build it, we're not going to stall them, we still have meetings that happen over the summer, I mean, stuff gets done, but we want to make sure that the residents and everyone knows what's happening so they can be part of this process. You know, in our change to the code would make sure that the residents are protected by requiring it to be built a certain way and operated a certain way as well. So that's sort of what our special exception is looking at. We did hire an attorney out of Tallahassee that deals with this sort of stuff. That is going to be 100% passed through to the club as part of the application fee. But that's you know, we're not just sort of figuring out as we go. We've retained someone who knows what they're doing relative to this. So with that, I would, without any, unless there are any questions, I think Mr. Swilley has something prepared.
I have a question. Can I ask the question?
We're gonna get through the report, and then, I mean, it is a board report, kind of an ad hoc thing, and then we'll just have questions from the public once Mr. Swilley is finished, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. I just, mainly, Mr. Dunham did a nice job introducing me, so I'll skip that part, but I'll just say thank you for hearing this, and mainly this will just be a form of education. I know we're not all water experts in the room, and so it's, I have been at the club on my 8th year. We're 100 acres of green space, and, you know, one thing I will say at the onset is that we're heavy into environmental stewardship. The members take it seriously, and we promote and advance those things, and as I shared with Mr. Mazzaro and Mr. Dunham, who have been extremely beneficial to work with, and I thank them. They've gotten lots of things today, but they deserve it. And so we're working through this process, and I believe that what we're doing wholeheartedly is going to be the best thing for the town, as well as a very symbiotic relationship for the golf course. So hopefully this will advance. If not, maybe I'll hit the key down. There we go. So try to go back here. Okay, so just really quickly, the aquifer system that Mr. Dunham pointed out. Currently, we're permitted to use 150 million gallons per year by South Florida Water Management District, and we do pull from the superficial aquifer. So that's your drinking water, essentially. I will say that, as I mentioned before, I'm big into environmental stewardship and conservation. I use lots of technology. We have moisture meters we use all around the golf course to measure the percentage in our greens and our fairways. So of that 150 million gallons that we're permitted, we only use on average for the last 10 years, 75 million gallons per year. So we're only using about half that total. The RO, as he mentioned, does use Florida and aquifer water, which is, to give you an idea, the superficial water, which is fresh, is around 150 to 250 parts per million. The water that we'll likely find at 1,200 to 1,500 feet would be around 3,000, so it's brackish water essentially. And to take that one step further, the ocean water is about 30,000, so it's to kind of give you an idea. So the water in the Florida aquifer certainly is not drinkable without treatment or potable. One of the things that Mr. Dunham mentioned that is significant, that is key, is that we're not trying to create potable water. We're using it for irrigation. We will not be creating potable water. And part of the potable water creation process is to scrub sulfur dioxide from the water to eliminate the sulfur taste and smell for your home. So in the absence of doing that, we won't be releasing that sulfur odor or that stuff into the air, which is what creates the smell. So smell is certainly not going to be an issue. And then the one major difference that we will have at Gulfstream, as in opposition to the Everglades, is that Our brine, which is the concentrate, will be returned back into an exfiltration trench, which is basically a drain field. It's going to run up, which is permitted by the DEP, and it's commonly done that way nowadays. The Everglades system was developed 25 years ago. So we'll be returning the brine subsurface. So even the refused water from the plant will never see the surface, essentially. A lot of the things that I just said, I'll just point out a couple. Our official water use permit currently is in place until 2027, so we're not against the wall to get anything done. We do have quite a bit of time. One of the requirements of our water use permit is that we do a 5-year feasibility study. So every 5 years, we represent whether or not we have reclaimed water available to us for use. South Florida Water Management District is very much moving in the direction of forcing high-volume water users like golf courses for irrigation to transfer onto reclaimed water as a source. Many of you may know the city of Boynton Beach is certainly looking for expanding their system and getting rid of more reclaimed water. I've been approached a number of times, which is one of the creations of sort of ushering this process along for us. The city of Delray is the same, not far off of our south end. So being an environmental steward, the last thing I want is to accept reclaimed water, use it for irrigation, and have it leaching into our waterways and eventually into the intracoastal and off the property. So while it is a great source for irrigation for some folks, I think that we're very blessed that the golf club is in a position to look for this alternative method of reverse osmosis. The project will, as I said, get us off of the superficial water. It will reduce the demand by 150 million gallons per year. The only thing that we would use that superficial water for into the future is if the system were to fail and we were to go down, it would be permitted for emergency backup use only. I won't bore you with the specs of the well. I'll move beyond that. So at our sort of at the onset, our preliminary site plan, you can see, which I'm going to skip over pretty quickly, because after meeting with Mr. Dunham and Mr. Nazzaro, I think we have already landed in a place where we feel like, and maybe I'll go back long enough to tell you, initially we were looking at repurposing this building. This is an existing structure that's there today. We were going to install the RO plant here where the mouse is inside the structure and build the storage tank, which would be used to house the water, the clean water that it makes. And the well location is basically here. In meeting, it kind of twofold. It benefits the club. We could use more storage and not give up our storage. We don't have enough storage as it is now for equipment. So we were, in effect, going to lose a little bit of storage in this scenario. And we've sort of come back with the idea of building basically an identical, nearly identical structure, at least in size, in this location, which you can see is substantially further away from the residential area. And then this location as well would have the existing structure as well as all of this very large, dense vegetation acting as a buffer. So any of the features that you see here that I have presented, the storage tank, which makes no noise, it's simply just like a bathtub, hold the water there if you would. It's hard to see on the map, but this blue spot is the location of the fluoridated well that has been permitted to be drilled by South Florida Water Management District. And then again, the nuts and bolts of the system that would be creating any noise would be only housed in this building. As you can see, the rough measurement from the residential area to this building is 285 feet. Again, it was pointed out, this is a list of clubs, which you've probably already read, that do have these systems: Everglades Club, Lost Trees, Seminole Golf Club, Jupiter Island Club, the city of Nalapan. There's quite a few other golf courses as well that have them. So sort of a lot of good sort of operations to look at, to view, to ask questions to. which I'll show you a couple of those. This black line indicates the brine. Would be a 3 or 4 inch in size HDPE pipe, so not very large. It would run over, and the drain field for reintroducing the brine into the soil would be over here on the golf course on the right-hand side. So essentially a solid wall from this entire run, and it wouldn't become permeable until this location on this side. This is Lost Tree in North Palm Beach. Their RO plant has been operating for 14 years. You can see that their plant, the noisemaker, is 272 feet from the closest residence. They have a 1 million gallon tank, which you can see there, an exfiltration trench, which is the same as what we would be installing. But as you can see, it's surrounded by high-end residential homes. This is the Everglades Club in Palm Beach, Florida. Again, their RO plant has been operating for 25 years. As Mr. Dunham mentioned, this is their storage lake. They have a 4-acre storage lake, so instead of using a tank, they're using a lake. I would point out that a lake isn't sensible for our application, unfortunately, due to our elevation constraints. Our current irrigation lake is below sea level at high tide, so intrusion, salt intrusion, would essentially contaminate the water that we make immediately. And this is only 110 feet from what Mr. Dunham thought may have been a hotel to start with, but it turns out that is quite the house. As I understand it today, will not be built here in the town of Gulfstream. So again, just wanted to point out, we do lots of wonderful programs. I won't bore you. I know we're probably over time, but we have bird box programs. We have an apiary. We have butterfly gardens. We have an osprey nest. And I really do believe you go out there, where else are you going to find 100 acres of green space for wildlife and in an otherwise residential densely populated area. So ultimately, I think that this is a preview. I've included my contact information here. Anytime, if anyone would like to come by and take a look at the site, take a look at the operation. I think that ultimately, as we move on into May and June and have these discussions further, there's no skeletons in the closet. South Florida is eventually going to force us to use reclaimed water if we don't have a solution like this. And so I think that you're tired of the overhead lines and the work in the development as far as the utility companies in your front yards and digging in your front yards. Well, if the reclaimed water line comes through, they're going to be digging in your front yards again to run that pipeline through the town and do different things. So I think that this ultimately, having the golf course not be a customer, that's what these places are looking for. The city of Boynton Beach and the city of Delray, they want large volume customers where they can get rid of lots of water. And so that's just, I thought, a key point. But thank you for your time, and I'll entertain any questions.
I would also add that, of course, the mayor's not here today, but in discussions with the staff, he had, the same concerns that we as a staff do, and that's the location, and its impact with noise and odor on residents. And so we preached that and said it over and over and over to Mr. Swilley, and he's obviously very up to date and knowledgeable about these systems, and so that makes us feel better that he understands how these work and what the potential issues would be with our residents.
If I may jump in before we see you again in May, if you want to hear me talk again, entertain our conversation. But it is worthwhile mentioning our engineer is the same engineer that designed and built the Everglades RO system. And our engineer would also be our general contractor. He is a GC. So it should be a really neat, clean process as far as working with Mrs. Taylor to meet all of the, and we do intend to provide construction docs, elevations, renderings ahead of the May meeting, so that you would have more information and a complete package to consider at that time. But as he pointed out, we do intend to phase the project even upon getting complete approval as in drilling the well. We hope to drill the well this summer, and that's part of the reason we have contracted with a well driller, and we are permitted both from South Florida and from the health department to drill the well currently. We would only need town approval to do that, but we want to be certain, and at the advice of Mr. Dunham and Mr. Mazzaro, we want to be certain that we select a suitable location for drilling the well and suitable for the town, for the residents. And as you'll see, it's obviously much closer to the golf course than any of the surrounding areas. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but you don't get responses in towns like this, and they've been extremely accommodating. So
just in the way of the process, we would be bringing something to you next month, which would be a code change and sort of like a, comparable to what we did with Mr. Glickstein's project. We're looking at the entire thing, but we're really just doing first reading on a number of these items. So we would have our first reading with whatever the special exception approved, amendment to the code would be, and you also have, the project, so you know exactly what they're doing with this special exception. So that's what we've advised we would like to see. So that's why we're having this meeting in such great detail, because next month we didn't want the commission to be surprised when we had this large scale project just sort of thrown in your lap. So.
And again, they originally wanted to basically do this with two applications, the well first and then the plant basically next year, but we said we'd rather have it done simultaneously. Again, as Mr. Mazzaro said, similar to what we did with the over in Place on Soleil. And so in other words, then they would need to be prepared when they come through with this approval process to approve both the well and the plant. Although then if they wanted to stagger the construction, that would be fine. There is a time limit on once you get an approval on when you can start the work, but I think they would be within that time limit.
Now the special exception, is that going to be, or the conditional use for the RO, that's going to be for the recreational land use designation in total? It's not going to be just as to the golf club?
No, sir.
No.
It's going to be the outdoor recreational, which would include the Little Club and I believe the B&T.
Okay.
So those are our properties that have our
designation.
Yes, sir.
And then did UDKS, do they have the conditions already kind of worked up for the?
We do have, yes, sir, we do.
Right.
When we've shared them and they've agreed that they would be able to meet those, no problem. They include certain decibel requirements at the property line and at the home, so it'd be no more than like a whisper, so essentially if it's audible at all, that would be our goal. We also have enforcement for the usage, where if there are 3 or more complaints within a 30-day time period for either smell or separately for sound, a noise, that an engineer would be hired to implement either sound or noise mitigation strategy, and that would be something they would be required to follow. So whatever it is that's making the noise, whether it's this, that, or the other, or the odor, there would be a plan to control that and decrease it. So in the event that, I don't think that the town wants to approve something that will generate these complaints, certainly, but it's just there as a just in case,
Just in case.
And it would be,
But are
like
they fixable just in case? I mean, they would be fixable.
That's right, I mean, we would have it, so the requirement would be to hire, we would hire an engineer, a sound or odor professionally licensed
There's no odor.
individual.
We were told that.
At the town, at the club's expense.
Right.
At the club's expense, right, and they would be forced to implement whatever the findings would be relative to that. And the club has been, has seen those criteria and has agreed to them. It's also required that it be completely screened from offsite views, to the extent that, Ms. Kraft is looking at, the Little Club, there would be requirements that it would not be seen either. So you would not see it, you would not hear it, and you would not smell it, is what
Well, I
our,
think it's a great idea.
so.
And it's worth mentioning as well to that effect that these designs are essentially like a kitchen. The building is 4 walls and all of the stuff that goes inside are sort of like appliances, so there's no water plant looking features or anything like that you would see. And then also the exhaust, or any noise really only happens on one side of the building, and it's not audible, it's barely audible, just standing outside with no extra effort, but that would be faced towards the golf course. So it would only be one side. They didn't have any openings or exhaust fans just for keeping the building cool. So that would be, again, not only blocked by the existing structured vegetation, the noise would be facing the golf course. So if there was anyone complaining, get Mr. Clay complaining to me.
And again, not to confuse anybody, I mean, Mr. Swilly did say there would be an exhaust feature on the building, but it's not the same type of exhaust that exists at Manalapan. That's the feature that's there, necessary there because it's potable water, and so this plant would not have that, and so there's no exhaust other than just air.
Yeah, I guess a better way to say vents.
Yeah,
Venting on the south side of the building.
And I feel good about, again, I'm struggled through, the construction of the plant in Manalapan and the complaints thereafter. And I don't know how many times, the plant is actually in the town of Hypoluxo. I don't know how many times I went before the Hypoluxo Town Commission to address noise and odor complaints. So they've got to really convince me that there's not going to be any odor, because I don't want to have to deal with that anymore. But they've done a good job, and I think I'm convinced now that the difference in the two plants is the reason that there will not be any odor, if not just a little. But so I feel much more comfortable about that.
How often are these plants upgraded once they're installed? I know it's kind of evolving.
Yeah, so this plant at Everglades Club is getting their first upgrade after 25 years. And the plant at Lost Tree is 14 years old with no upgrade to date. And then your comment as well, plant, the concept is we run water at night when nobody is playing golf. The RO system creates water, which means that it's creating water during business hours for the most part. It's going to start in the morning and it's going to run during the day. It's going to make the water it needs, and therefore, even from a noise standpoint, it's running when the guys are weeding your yard and mowing outside. So it's during the daytime hours that the plant is going to be running.
Any questions from the public? Maybe one, Guppy? Sure.
I have a question. When Greg's talking about noise and odor, my understanding is that Gulfstream doesn't have any meter or, who determines what a bad odor is or what the complaint is? I mean, I live right next to the Little Club kitchen, and the odors are awful. And I haven't done anything because they're going to redo the kitchen, and I'm assuming that the new exhaust system will take care of that. But who determines if it's a bad odor? And then what do you do about it? I don't think the town has any, I don't know what you would call it, rating system of odors. so that, you know, my complaint may not, you know, the chef may think it's just fine, I don't know. My other concern is that if the golf club is given the special exception for this, why then would not the little club one day want it? And where would they, you know, what are we opening here as far as noise and odor? The golf club has 100 acres, but the little club is completely surrounded by residential properties. And their expansion has really taken a toll on some of the neighbors.
Well, I can answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna have Trey answer, the noise and odor question, but, the little club, decided that they wanted to do the same thing. I mean, they would be eligible to do exactly what they're doing.
Right, subject to so the little club's roughly 38 acres, and the water there is, I know more about this than I should, the water there is typically affected the ponds. There are salinity issues, but you know, you're gonna have special except, the reason why you call it a conditional use, we have a special exception in the code, which is what we approved for the house, it's really a conditional use. You have to have 8 criteria, which are gonna be in the ordinance next month, that says in order to put this in, you can't just apply for a permit and it's done. In order to put this in, you've got to adhere to these 8 things. And, you know, one of the things we're looking at here is 270 feet from the nearest structure, or over 200 feet from the nearest home. So, you know, there's probably not room, but again, it would have to be the same process. It's not just, in layman's terms, the golf club did it, so now another club or golf course can do the same thing. And this town is unique, which is why we're glad we have Greg and Trey and everyone. Every single spot, site, condition, you know, is different in this town. You know, it's weird to see Mr. Swilley say that the golf club's ponds are below sea level. I mean, everything is very odd. So we understand that, and I think all of us have an understanding of what would be needed. And again, it would have to be something totally different over there. But you still have, the code still protects the residents when something like this happens.
But there's great concern about the odor coming out of this facility, and Greg certainly.
Sure, and I'll let
I'm just
Trey
wondering
adjust that.
what precautions are being taken for the kitchen odors, you know, at the little.
Sure, well,
Should
the kit, yeah.
persist.
Yeah, I mean, odor, whether it's from a plant or from a kitchen, I'll let Trey kind of address that.
So just with respect to the odor, that would be addressed in the special exception criteria. The enforcement mechanism would come in if 3 residents from separate households complained within a 30-day period. And it's not, they complained that it was really bad, they complained that, you know, it was just any complaint from 3 residents within that 30-day time period. And then that would kick in our odor control mechanism, where we hire someone at the club's cost to implement an odor control protocol, and we would address that. So it would be someone that's professionally licensed to figure out where the smell is coming from, how is it getting to these residents, and how to address that. So that is how the special exception criteria would be addressed, and that would be something that we would put in a.
But Trey, are there standards of clean air or standards for odors? You know, does Gulfstream have any standards?
We have,
for residents?
as a general nuisance, I mean, something that, you know, our general nuisance addresses odors, but it doesn't have like a rating system or anything like that. And that is why we did reach out to someone who has a background in this, so they could say, well, this is how you really address odor. It's not, there's not a decibel rating for odor. It's not a smell of 100 versus a smell of 50. The nose knows. So with that in mind, it's the number of residents that would complain over a certain time period. Again, you know, I know the town manager well. He does not want to field lots of complaints if this is approved. So, you know, I don't think that he would be saying the things that he's saying if he felt there was still an issue with odor. I don't mean to
No,
word it.
the golf club proposal seems very, you know, well thought out, and I don't have any problem with that. I'm just talking about the addressing of the odor. You know, is it something that the commission should look at? I mean, is there any odor in any other community? It's a real problem where I live.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things. You're
Well,
talking
there
about
are
kitchen,
odors,
and this
though.
is a
I mean,
reverse
odor
osmosis
could
plant.
emanate from that as well
Right.
as from.
But I don't think we can confuse these two issues right now. I think he was saying if there's 3 residents that complain of the odor, they're gonna have it with, authority to mitigate the situation. I don't think you can, I'm not trying to dismiss your
No, I
complaints, but
understand, and I agree.
when
I
you
think
buy a
that
house
part
next
is
to
very
a kitchen,
responsible.
I mean, and you move in, I mean, hopefully the new exhaust will help you, but it's two different situations.
I agree. They've addressed theirs
Sure.
very well. I have
I
no
mean-
problem. It's just, as soon as I heard Greg mention odor, it translated to me to
Yeah,
odors emanating from other,
yeah, no, I,
yeah.
So we have every municipality in this code and ordinances has nuisance provisions. And
yeah,
that applies to any number of things that can be a nuisance. And it's a code enforcement issue, oftentimes in municipalities, and we address it. So as far as the Commissioner Ortmark's point, as far as the golf club is concerned with the conditional use, we have those provisions in there, which totally unrelated. It's very similar to something we looked at, which you all spent some time on with pickleball, which involved noise and nuisance. So it is we kind of dovetailed some of that time we spent on that. But then as far as the kitchen renovation, it's very expensive over at the Little Club, and we realized the casinos have a need on that to make sure it's done right, and it's going to happen this summer, and I think there'll be a significant improvement. But our standard code and ordinances do address the concern on that as well. You don't need a special, a conditional use for that as for this unique thing with the golf club plant, water plant.
Can I get in one last question?
Sure.
Are there any adverse consequences environmentally to where you reintroduce the brine back into the soil?
No, ma'am, there are not. So the brine is literally just what it sounds like. It's just sodium. So the sodium is going to return, sort of leach through naturally to the aquifer. The functionality of the aquifer is based on density. So the reason the salt water is very deep is because it's more dense. So the salt, as it passes through the aquifer, will just continue to drop, and it will go right back down, basically where it came from. So from a volume standpoint, it's completely negligible. And for instance, the Everglades Club stores their brine in a pond on the golf course, and it's exposed. So it's basically, you would drive by and think it's a lake. In fact, it's a brine, so maybe it'd be a good place to take a bath, but it's exposed. And so I think that also lends to the idea that it's very friendly, no issues with the wildlife and no issues with plant material. So that answers your question.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? Okay, thank you all. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Reports. You see the meeting dates for architectural review and planning board, March, April, May, and June forthcoming. And then we're on to finance director report. Mr. Dunham.
Yes, sir. Besides, Ms. Tu's comments in the report, we would ask for you to accept that report that is provided to you.
Water usage report.
I did not see any abnormalities with that, so I would ask you to approve that too.
And we'll accept it as submitted. Police chief. Chief.
Requested the accepted as submitted. We did have one car, just stolen last month. It was a Cadillac Escalade, it's a red car. It was stolen from the Gulfstream Golf Club around noontime. It was, unlocked with the keys in it. And, it appeared to be a targeted item because their video showed the subject that took the car, showed him walking in right off A1A and walked directly to the Cadillac, get in it and drive away. Didn't go in any of the cars or anything, so it appears that was a targeted vehicle.
So we just, I think everyone, he reached out to everyone, including the clubs and ballet, and
Oh, yeah.
and everybody's got a little heightened awareness. Okay.
And that's the biggest reason we have, you know, had the bad guys haven't gone away. You know, they're still around, but I think the biggest reason we have slowed down where we are is because we've been educating people in town, and it's finally starting to work, you know.
Good, yeah, protect the key fobs.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the other thing I've been advising everyone too, when they've asked me, including with caregivers and dog walkers and things, is when you leave your house at 8 in the morning to walk the dog or do whatever you're doing outside, go for a run or what have you, you should lock the door. Because the key fobs are sitting, you know, pretty close to the door, depending on how large or small your home is. So you know, we've done that in this area for 40 years, so you know, it's kind of a re-advising. Okay, thanks, Chief.
Mention that to my brother.
You know, the old garage door open all day. Yeah, I know, nobody wants to do it, but you know, it's a good practice. I'll speak to because we have a wonderful police department that's taking good care of us and helping us prevent these problems now. Item 10, items for commission action. We've got a bid award for the audio-visual system for this chamber, which I'm holding right here in my hand. I lost my clip.
Okay, Mr. Vice Mayor, as you know, you guys authorized us to upgrade our audio-visual video system here, which looks like Rita's having to work on as we speak. Especially during COVID, you guys, we found out how much we needed to upgrade our audio-visual as we tried to go virtual with, our meeting. Each meeting, it seemed like there was a different problem, and congratulations to Ms. Tu and Renee and Rita in fixing those during the meetings as we would meet. So we did have a selection procedure that was just like the procedure we did to hire the auditor. So we had a committee that had criteria to consider. That criteria was project, schedule and timeframe, selection committee ability to fulfill the needs of the town, including video streaming, sound, wiring, presentation, viewability, and function and control system. Aesthetics design, preservation of the dais and wall paneling, price and references and experience with similar projects. The committee, actually, all of the committee members are here except one. We had Ms. Basil, Ms. Tu, and then our IT contractors. And I believe we have one of those with us today. There we go. And so, as you can see, the recommendation or the highest contractor, the contractor that obtained the highest number of votes was Innuvo, and their proposal was at $47,000 and change. You see that there was one that came in second that was lower than that, but I believe the committee members had an explanation of the difference between the two proposals and why we would recommend going with Innuvo. Rebecca, do you want to mention the one that we're most particularly interested in?
So after our committee selection met, and our selection committee met, then after we totaled all our points, we did come up that the one that got the most votes from us was about $10,000 more. However, the difference between the two, the lower price one reused the equipment that we're trying to replace. So that's a little confusing in itself. So they were recycling a lot of the parts and components that we've already said these things don't work. So that explains a lot of this price difference. I mean, so we just logically went with the one that really came up with had the best equipment equipment, comprehensive equipment list, and also really took great steps to ensure that there would be minimal impact on this very rare wood around our commission chambers.
Question?
Yes.
So as, many of you know, I attended, a lot of the meetings for a while remotely. And, many of you probably know my hearing's very poor. So listening to it, particularly when people have masks, was really difficult to hear the audio distinctly. The other observation I would have is that when somebody was presenting on the podium there, up on the wall, you only had, you didn't see this. And so there's a way that we can sort of capture the full presentation. So if somebody's watching it remotely or subsequently, which I actually do with the ARPB, it would be really kind of nice to be able to see. I'm not quite sure how you do it.
Yes, our game plan is to have the new system to be able to have an integrated presentation software package and equipment that you would need. So that way, part of the package also includes being able to add another screen for the audience being able to see. So we're trying to move towards digital presentation, so it'll be much more comprehensive and easily accessible to people and viewable. So that was another reason that we really liked the Nuvo. So, because they seem to take consideration in us moving towards digital presentations and getting away from the boards that are problematic, especially when you're trying to capture that on video feed.
And what about the interface between the podium and the screen? Is that part of?
Yes. There's going to be a control panel. It should be much, much easier to manage than the bizarre setup that I have right now.
Thank you. Because we're spending a lot of money, and I just wanted to see what the value add was.
The wonderful thing about this package is that it gives us a really nice baseline to be able to expand it if our needs happen to change in the future. Our system currently is static. You cannot upgrade this system. So the one that we're getting, if things should change, no one saw COVID-19 coming, but if something like that should happen again, the system is built to a point that we can build upon it to make it meet any future needs much more easily than what we currently have.
So Rita, what do you think?
I don't think I want to comment. Well, basically, this system has served us well through its time, but it's become obsolete and we can't get parts that we need for it. So my main objection to doing anything is that they don't cut holes in the wood.
And I think they've addressed that. Right?
Yes, this company took great pains at addressing that they would do everything within their abilities to maintain the integrity of our paneling.
Matter of fact, I think whoever built this, did you guys?
No.
Actually, did they actually drill a hole in the dais?
They were going to mount microphones. And you see that little knob on the top of the desk there?
Yeah.
And then when they were starting to put it in, I come in here and he was drilling this hole and I nearly had a stroke. I said, you can't do that. You got to get down underneath. And he said, well, we can't because the way this is constructed, we can't do that. They were going to have to bring the cords up over the top of the desk. And so then I said, you got to figure out something else. So that's how they came out with the little microphones that you have. I don't really know what's going to happen with this one. but they know they're not gonna drill any holes.
I think probably the technology is
Yeah.
pretty good, so they don't
Yeah.
have to start drilling things.
If you have any technical questions, Eric Wells, our IT manager from Calvin G. Odor and Associates is here. He can answer any technical questions that you may have. But
Well, I have one question, for the customer who uses that. Some people are more savvy than others. Is it gonna be pretty friendly?
They're gonna give us training, and it is friendly.
Okay, good, thank you.
Just have one last quick question, and we'll move on. So typically, we're gonna, at some point, probably not have these folders, and so we'll have either a laptop or an iPad or something of that effect here. Obviously, that can hook into the server, we all know that, but is this somewhat compatible with that?
it will be,
Yeah.
but when y'all give me the go-ahead to do that, I will make it happen. But I'm not, it's gonna, yep. Y'all gotta
Not
tell
right
me
now,
first, that's what you want.
just throwing it out there, 'cause there's a lot
Okay.
of other, our packages are relatively small, except for 2 or 3 times a year, so it's oftentimes not needed, but, okay.
So if we do that, then we can then be like Ocean Ridge.
Yeah, they have their laptops right in front of them all the time. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's all digital.
That's digital, thank you. That'll
It's
work.
cool, but the microphones are terrible, especially for short people, you have to like, for the entire time doing that. So
Oh, really?
we're actually looking to move the clip-on.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? Do you need a motion from us? So we're gonna have a motion from the commission to approve the Anuvo bid for, $49,612.71. Somebody make the motion, please.
I'll move to, give you the money for the Nuvo, audience system of $49,612.71.
Second,
Rita, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Lyons,
Yes,
Commissioner White,
yes,
Commissioner Orthwein,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stanley.
Yes. Items by mayor and commissioners. Anybody else have any comments for the good of the order?
Yeah, good job.
Okay, the meeting's adjourned. Great job, everyone.
thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
No, Mrs. Thorpe's already got her purse.
Well, I was looking